Dr. Rowdy reads in our coverage of the King's Quest Companion, the novelization of the classic King's Quest computer adventure games by Roberta Williams. We are now ready to proceed with version 4, chapter 4, more or less. It's actually not chapter 4, but the story of the 4th game, The Perils of Rosella. Let us proceed. This is Rosella's story, although to tell it I must begin with myself. Rosella lies quiet now, recovering from her ordeals. She has told me her story again and again, trying to purge many of its horrors from her mind to make them less real for the retelling. She begs me to record her recounting, ink to parchment, before the facts grow cold and distant. This I do gladly for my daughter, who risked it all, again and again, for the love of her father. My children are finally safe, and my husband is again well. Daventry is rebuilding. A peace seems to be settling on the land, like a weary warrior home from the wars sinking into a comfy chair. The fit is good, the fighter and the chair, Daventry and peace. All want and pray for the end of the troubles, and release from the weariness that steals people's strength and souls. We pray the peace does not pass as quickly as the almost remembered dream of a quiet night. I am Valenice of Colima, daughter of Coignice, who was a miller's daughter, and Cedric, a prince of that fair and tropic land. Now I am wife and love to King Graham of Daventry, who rescued me from the crystal tower of the Enchanted Isles, and to his father, to our twin children, Alexander and Rosella. I have some small reputation as a scholar versed in the history and folklore of our world, but I am more comfortable as a teacher of young minds, getting joy from the smiles of discovery beaming from children's faces. The pleasure of seeing those smiles on Alexander's face was denied me, as was his childhood and youth, after he was stolen from his cradle by the shores of Lake Maley. But Rosella, my darling Rosella, she I taught, both as student, daughter, and heir to the throne of Daventry. All I knew and all I learned I offered her, as did my husband. Histories, geography, folklore, common sense, and rules of thumb, swimming, running, riding, shooting, and fighting, stories of honor, courage, valor, humor, and humility, tales of love, death, and hard choices. All these she devoured, as if hungry to learn enough for two. She also learned to climb trees and clean house, sing, play the flute, the lute, and all the keyboards, speak politely, listen quietly, and survive alone in wilderness. All of our love we gave to our princess, and when the dragon, oh vile beast, demanded her as sacrifice against the total destruction of all Daventry and his people, she returned that love by willingly going to meet that flaming doom. She had learned well about hard choices, and marched with sure, firm steps, back straight and head held high to the appointed place. Only one small, quiet tear glistened on her young face as she kissed us farewell for what we all thought would be the final time. As she disappeared into the mountain, Graham and I were devastated with loss. I think it was the immensity of emotion, combined with the sudden and complete change of fortune, that brought about my husband's collapse. Rosella was gone but 2 or 3 hours when the gnome came shouting to the castle's gates that she was safe and well. We went from the pit of grief to the pinnacle of happiness in the time it took to hear, "Rosella is safe! The kingdom is saved!" This news, this happy shock, left Graham and I so weak-kneed that we literally could not stand after hearing it. Thus it was that we were sitting on our thrones to greet the daughter who came back to us as if from the dead. She was leading her long-lost and presumed dead brother, our only son Alexander, by the hand. It seemed hours, but 'twas only minutes that we laughed and cried, and hugged and cried some more. In a world where miracles often happen, where sometimes the impossible only takes a little longer, that for which we had given up all hope stood embracing us. After almost 18 years, we were a family again. It lasted less than an hour. In the euphoria of the occasion, Graham went and took the old hat he called his adventurer's hat, the rumpled one with the red feather, and tossed it to the children, offering them their future. It was still drifting down towards their outstretched hands when my beloved Graham dropped to the floor, clutching his chest. As I said, I think too many strong emotions in too short a time are what felled him. With all haste, he was taken to our chambers and the royal physicians summoned. They could do no good. Nothing helped my husband, neither their healing herbs and ointments, magical invocations, nor laying on of his hands. Death seemed certain and certainly soon. Rosella, who had just so recently stared at her own death, could not bear to witness her father's imminent end. New tears burst from her as she rushed to the throne room so as to grieve alone. If there were only something I could do, she demanded of the empty air, knowing that no answer would come. But one did. A soft voice whispered to her from nowhere, "If you really want to help, look into the magic mirror, for help is there." Unbelieving and startled, Rosella quickly turned to face Merlin's mirror, which tells the future and tells it true. She watched it shimmer and saw a woman's face appear. The image was that of the fairy Genesta, who some say is queen of all the fairies. Genesta told Rosella of a magic tree that bears just one fruit every 100 years, and how that fruit cures all ills, bestowing perfect health for many years upon the one who eats it. Genesta offered to take Rosella to Tamir, where the tree was, even then, bearing its unique fruit. Genesta's magic would carry her to the far land. There was something in the way Genesta made the offer that caused my daughter to refrain from elation. "There's something you're not telling me, I think. I would accept the fruit gladly for my father's sake, but why can't you simply bring it here? Why do I have to go there?" Genesta nodded. "Life is never simple, is it? If you come here, I will explain. But you must make up your mind quickly, for my powers are fading, and once here I might not be able to help you return. It is King Graham's only hope, and you must decide now if you truly wish to help your father." Rosella says that doubts and indecision crossed her mind at that moment. They crossed her mind and then faded away behind a courageous and determined, "Yes, I will go." What should I bring? Oh! Rosella had continued speaking, following her vigorous nod of agreement. Those words were not spoken in the throne room of Castle Daventry, however, but on a lonely beach by an ocean. Genesta's magic had carried her there in the time between words. Rosella assumed she was now in Tamir. "I never expected to get here this quickly," she murmured in her amazement. It seemed a fair place. Looking around, she saw a golden beach stretching north and south, and a small river flowing out of the east through flower-filled meadows. The ocean filled all of the west, although Rosella thought she could barely see the faint outline of an island in the distance. On the other hand, it just might have been clouds or fog. She wasn't sure. As she stared across the waves, 3 dots appeared flying towards her, soon resolving themselves into the forms of Genesta and 2 other creatures, fairies of the tiny race. They all floated noiselessly to the ground in front of her. Rosella was stunned by Genesta's beauty, but the fairy queen carried a sad and desperate expression upon her face. "Welcome to Tamir," she said. "Yesterday, while I walked through the nearby woods, an evil fairy by the name of Lolotte attacked me. She stole a magic talisman from around my neck, leaving me I think for dead. I was not, although I will be soon, for the talisman is the source of much of my magic. My powers have already diminished, and if the talisman is not recovered within 24 hours, I will die. Lolotte is evil and hates me. She will use the talisman for evil purposes and contaminate the land. Only you can stop her. Genesta went on to say that she thought Rosella could get into Lolotte's castle, which lurked above Tamir in the Impossible Mountains. To help, she waved her wand and transformed my daughter's gown into the simple dress of a peasant girl, saying the disguise would help Lolotte if Lotte captured her. But what about my father? What about the magic fruit? The fruit is on a tiny tree, on a tiny island in a swamp. The swamp is on the other side of the mountains, on the other side of a waterfall, and on the other side of a dark and fearsome cave, the lair of the troll. That is where you must go find it. However, I will not be able to return you to Daventry unless I have the talisman. So you must get it back from Lolotte and bring it to me on my island. It is the only hope for me, Tamir, and your father. With that, Genesta and her fairies flew back over the waves and out of sight. Thanks a lot, my daughter grumbled. But then I'm not tied to a stake, face dismounts with a three-headed fire-breathing dragon. My father, mother, and brother have all done impossible things. It's my turn to show them up. Lolotte and the Impossible Mountains lay to the east, so Rosella set her steps that way, following the cold river. She had not gone far when she was surprised by the sight of a unicorn standing in a fragrant meadow next to where the river turned north. Some say the unicorn is a mythic beast that does not exist, in fact, but there it stood, spotted gray in color, its head nodding, and sunlight glinting off its long golden horn. The great magical horned horse grazed among the wildflowers. Startled at the sound of Rosella coming close, the beast bolted away. Saddened at not being able to gaze longer upon the unicorn, Rosella continued following the river north, then east, until she came to a stone bridge crossing the stream. As she came closer to what she thought a charming span, a sparkle caught her eye where a stray ray of sunlight slipped under the bridge. Kneeling, she got a good look at what appeared to be a ball, a golden ball the size of a large button. Rosella admired the ball's luster and hefted it. Heavier than it looked, it must have been made of pure gold. She put the treasure into one of the many pockets of her peasant dress and followed the stream east. The river meandered calmly through the trees, on and on. Soon it even flowed directly through the roots of an oak so large that a small two-story house was built between the giant branches on the river's bank. A red door beckoned her to knock. Perhaps she could get help on her dual quests. 3 knocks brought silence. Rosella thought someone should be home because a thin trail of smoke drifted out of the chimney. Gingerly, she opened the door and shouted, "Anyone here? Yoo-hoo!" Still, there was no answer. So she started looking around. The place was an absolute abysmal mess. In the sink were dirty dishes that looked like as if they had been unscrubbed for weeks, with crusty remains of half-finished meals stuck tight to them. Yuck. It looked even worse to Rosella upstairs. Still calling for anyone who might be there, she discovered one large bedroom containing 7 small beds. At least at the time she thought there were 7. So bad was the mess there, with dirt-caked clothes and boots strewn everywhere, stiff socks with odors that brought her close to retching, and filthy bedding that appeared to move under its own power. Rosella was sure no one who lived there knew just what the debris hid. There could have been an entire village there that she couldn't see. It was beyond yuck. Down the stairs and outside my daughter ran, hoping to get some fresh air. Breathing deeply, she crossed the gentle river and walked to the hilly woods just south of the house. The scent of pine and fresh earth soon cleared her head. I thought my room was messy, she told herself. Before long, Rosella spotted a door in one of the hills, apparently the entrance to a mine. The sound of people digging came from within, and she thought perhaps the folk might be able to give her some help. Inside, she found 7 stocky people, dwarfs by their appearance, digging what looked like diamonds from the earth. They were so dirty from their labors that she was sure that these were the folk who lived in the treehouse. The mine even smelled much the same. "Hello!" she cried, trying to get their attention. Their attention she got all right. The dwarves looked up at her, but their looks weren't very friendly. Grumbling, they went back to their work, but one especially grumpy-looking one told her gruffly, "Scram!" Rosella scrammed right back to their filthy house. While not exactly hot-headed, my daughter does not take insult lightly. She felt her treatment by the miners was insulting, and some retribution was in order. She cleaned their house. I know, it seems like a stupid idea. She has little less than a day to accomplish 2 life-or-death quests, and she spends some of the precious time getting even for some imagined insult. That's my daughter. She's always been her own woman. It's hard, but we all must always remember that we cannot live our children's lives for them. Not that anyone could have stopped her at that time. Why clean house, though? She tells me that in her messy room, she knows exactly where everything is, and figured the same must be true of the 7 dwarfs. By cleaning the filth and clutter, they might never find anything again, and this would be sweet payback. And it was a small house. The dwarves walked in just as she finished. Rosella heard them coming, but all she could do was hide in a corner and hope they'd just kick her out when they found her. She would not lie. She would admit to what she did, but she didn't have to tell them why. Anyway, they probably wouldn't hurt someone for cleaning, would they? They wouldn't. One by one, they filed into the kitchen and poured themselves bowls of steaming soup. Perhaps they were too tired from their labors, but they didn't see Rosella and they didn't see the cleaning. Finally, one by one, their bowls full, they sniffed and looked around. Grins burst out on their tired faces as they noticed both the clean state of affairs and my daughter. So delighted were they with what they saw, they actually thanked Rosella and asked her name, and would she like to sit with them and join her supper. Rosella smiled back. She too was no longer angry, and hungrily she ate some of the soup. It was surprisingly good. The dwarves had never heard of Daventry, but they were well aware of Lalote, and had held no love for her. Such was the conversation while all finished their brief meal. They could offer no news or information to aid her. "Well, it's off to work we go," groused the grumpy dwarf from the mine. With a hearty hi-ho, they pushed themselves away from the table and started back to their mine. Rosella could hear them singing a marching song as they disappeared. Clearing the dishes from the table before she too left, Rosella saw a thick blue pouch lying amongst the empty bowls. One of the miners must have forgotten it. Opening it up, she discovered a large handful of sparkling diamonds, a fortune for miners such as these. She quickly hurried after them to the mine to return the precious stones. I did raise her, to be honest. Inside the mine, diamonds sparkled and glittered from the walls. The dwarfs were already busily working. Rosella stopped the first miner she saw and offered him the pouch. "Thanks. Keep 'em," he said. "I don't want 'em." And that's the way it was from all of the dwarfs. She walked deeper into the mine and each one gave her the same answer. "Nah, you keep it. We got plenty." At the very back of the mine, the grumpy one looked up and gently told her that he didn't want the diamonds either. Anyway, the mine was no place for a girl like her. "Here, take this," he said, handing her an extra lantern. "It just might come in handy sometime. Now, skedaddle." Rosella did just that, being careful not to fall down the narrow path out from the shaft. When she arrived at the treehouse the second time, Rosella caught a glimpse of another house beyond the trees, somewhat to the north. Any help she could get she wanted, so she turned her steps north past the dwarf's place. She now thought of it as the home of friends. The trees got thicker as she moved north, and they led to a graveyard just a little west of the large house she had seen. Graveyards are not common, I know, but it is said that they are creepy even in the harshest light of day. This one, shrouded by trees both alive and dead, seemed that way to Rosella. She stopped briefly to read the inscriptions on a few of the tombstones. At the back, there was even the grave of a 6-month-old infant who had died in its sleep. Oh, so sad it was. But she kept her legs moving mostly east to what now appeared to be an old manor house. Rosella kept looking over her shoulder, sure someone or something was following her, and that the cold breeze she felt on her neck blew from some unwholesome place. The manor house wasn't much more comforting. Ancient and falling apart, it too sent shudders up and down Rosella's back. No smoke left its chimney. It might well have been abandoned. Nonetheless, Rosella walked the few stairs to the door and knocked loudly. As was the case at the dwarf's house, no reply came to any of her repeated knocks and shouts. With a deep breath for extra courage, my daughter opened the creaky door and entered. Rosella was not at all surprised at the many cobwebs she had to wade through. Abandoned houses grow them much, as we grow nails on fingers and toes. They always grow back. Where is it? She found herself in the entryway, where a staircase led up to several open doorways. A mirror stood at the front of the stairs, and in it she saw the reflection of a pretty peasant girl. With a start, Rosella realized that the girl was herself. A grandfather clock showed the only sign of life. The steady ticking of time reminded her that both her father's and Janesta's lives would run out of ticks the following dawn. To her right, Rosella found the dust-encrusted dining room, and past that was an utterly cold kitchen. Rosella imagined it had been many years since it had been used. Indeed, it must have been many years since the house itself had been occupied by anything other than mice and spiders. To the left of the entrance hall she found an equally cold parlor. No fire in the hearth, but a few moldy books still set on the dusty shelves. A large portrait of a young girl hung over the fireplace, its eyes seeming to stare at the parlor's left wall. Rosella's eyes followed that gaze and noticed something. Examining the left wall, she discovered a little latch where one of the bookcases and the wall met. She flipped the latch, and it opened a secret door into the wall. On the other side of that door, Rosella looked onto a narrow staircase going up, and a shovel leaning against the one stone wall. Shouting hello yet again, my daughter went up those stairs that were so narrow, twisty, and slick with damp that she was ever in danger of tumbling down to the stone floor, perhaps to her death. At the top, oh, endless climb, she found an old pipe organ and nothing else. The organ played well and had good tone, but there was nothing to keep Rosella there, other than her displeasure in having to climb down those treacherous stairs wearing a long skirt. There was much to be done, so down she did go. The climb didn't change her mind about skirts and stairs at all. My daughter loves books. She sometimes would rather read than eat or sleep. And this is a good habit that Graham and I have always encouraged. On her way through the parlor, Rosella spent a moment to look at the few books that remained in their abandonment. There was but one of any note, the complete works of Shakespeare, but it was one of her favorites. The bard's works are rare, but not unknown in our kingdom, and my daughter had taken to memorizing many of the better passages and reciting them with dramatic flair. She always played the heroine. Rosella decided to take the book with her for when she returned to Daventry. If she ever returned, she reminded herself. Atop the main staircase were 3 bedrooms in as much disrepair as the rest of the manor. The room at the top right of the hall had what looked like a trap door in its ceiling, but there was no way to reach it. The ceiling was too high and had no rope hung down. The second door led to what must have been the master bedroom. It was dominated by a massive canopy bed. A baby nursery led off from this room, and Rosella sneezed several times from the amount of dust her passing raised as she walked to it. Once love must have filled it, but all that remained amid the dust were a small wooden horse, a cradle, and some furniture. Even the memories were gone. Rosella left the spooky old manor house and continued her journey east. It turned out that another graveyard lay there, butting into the sheer face of the mountains. A crypt was built right into that mountain, with a locked door to bar entrance to anyone without the key. Rosella looked around her and, though the sun shone bright above the overhanging trees, felt overwhelming gloom and despair oozing from the entire cemetery. She looked around, thinking movement might loosen the mood, but to no avail. Near the back part of the place, she came across the gravestone of yet another child, a young boy. This was too much for my daughter. So sad was the inscription, Rosella could stay there no longer. Weeping, she walked back the way she came, past the manor and on through the other part of the graveyard, knowing her steps should soon bring her to open country. Sunlight bounced merrily on the still blue and green of the little pond. Rosella shares her father's love of water, and even though the pond was too small to swim in, it offered a clean, open, sunny, healthy place for her to rest a moment. She sought calm by looking at the water lilies that floated serenely on the surface, idly rolling the gold ball she had found earlier between her hands. A frog, something not at all unusual in a lily pond, sat on one of the floating flowers. The crown on the frog's head, however, was a trifle out of the ordinary. Rosella was immediately pulled out of her glum mood by her youthful curiosity. To be 18 again, well, almost 18, with all the wonders of the universe waiting to be discovered. My daughter quickly rushed to the other side of the pond to get a closer look at this remarkable frog. As she did so, however, the ball fell from her hand, and she watched it disappear into the pond. Flash! The frog was in the water, following the ball under. Moments later, the small creature popped back up with it firmly in its mouth. Before retrieving the ball, Rosella reached over and picked up the frog. She was so happy to get the gold ball back that she held the frog firmly, leaned over, and gave it a kiss of gratitude. Yuck! It gets yuckier. First, the frog turned into a young man, a prince actually. Rosella says her heart went pitter-patter when she finally got past her surprise at the sudden transformation. Maybe he will help me in his gratitude, she told herself. I hope so. He sure is good-looking. This was the day my daughter finally learned the lesson that looks are not everything. The prince looked at her once, twice, twisting his face in disgust. He scowled at my princess and spat out, "You're just a peasant, you peasant! I don't want to be around you. Take this thing. You might look more pleasing as a frog anyway." With that, and not even a polite thank you, he threw the little crown to Rosella, turned up his nose, turned his back, and sauntered off. Even I hope that nameless twit eventually said the wrong thing to the right monster. He was more disgusting than kissing a dozen dirty old frogs. He didn't take the gold ball, so Rosella picked it up and put it in her pocket along with the tiny gold crown. Still fuming, she headed west toward the ocean. Rosella found herself wandering through another wildflower meadow, the scents of summer hanging delightfully heavy and replacing all memories of damp earth and tombstones. What sounded like something like a melody joined the perfume of the air as my daughter walked. It got nearer and more distinct as she journeyed. It also began to sound less and less like good music. Rosella eventually encountered the musician, sitting on a stump in the middle of a glade. He dressed like one of the minstrels who had often entertained in the court of Daventry. He strummed upon a lovely cherrywood lute and even sang with a strong voice, but he wasn't any good. His fingers would miss the notes often, and his voice kept missing the melody. Rosella listened politely for a few minutes, but The man seemed to enjoy an audience, and smiling with the confidence of self-perceived talents, continued enthusiastically into another song. When he finished, Rosella attempted to talk to him. Instead of an answer, she got yet another untamed melody. This time it was Green Sleeves, the anthem of her father's court. At least that is what he was trying to play. This was quite enough to her offended ears. "Here, take this," she said as she handed the man the book of Shakespeare. Perhaps he would stop playing. If he did, she felt that she would have done the world a large favor. Her idea worked. He did cease his playing to turn the pages. In a few moments, his face burst again with creative fervor as he began to recite one of the plays aloud. He was as good an actor as he was a minstrel. "I shall become an actor!" he exclaimed loudly and proudly to the world. "I shall become famous throughout all the realms of the world, and all shall sing the praises of Frankie of Avalon. Oh, thank you for your gift, sweet peasant. As a gift to you, my dear girl, I present you with my lute. It is precious, but you have given me something more precious still." Waving his arms dramatically and reading aloud to the heavens, he wandered off. The direction he chose was the same as that of the Frog Prince. Rosella wished them upon each other. Lute under arm, my daughter continued west to the sea. It was still there. To the north of where she stood watching the waves, Rosella could see smoke rising out of the chimney of a small shack. When she got there, she could see it was so run down as to be falling apart. For a change, a woman's voice answered her knock. "Come on in," she heard. Inside was in as bad a shape as out. An old woman stood preparing food in the one-room shack. She was neither polite nor friendly. Taking one look at Rosella, she waved her hand towards the still open door. "You're not who I was expecting," she growled. "Get out! I ain't buying anything. I ain't got no gold. Get! I say get!" Rosella got. Outside, a long pier stretched its way out into the ocean. At the end, an old man sat fishing, although the complete lack of fish beside him suggested his luck had not been good. He totally ignored Rosella, rose, and walked quickly back to the old shack as soon as she approached. He swung the door closed behind him, right in Rosella's face. "People sure don't seem to like strangers around here, do they?" she told herself. Scratching her nose, checking it for splinters from the door, she walked east past the fisherman's hut, considering what to do next. Time was passing quickly, and she seemed to be getting nowhere just as fast. What to do next had horns, hooves, and was playing a flute. Rosella recognized the creature as a half-man, half-goat satyr, if she remembered her natural history correctly. Possibly it was Pan himself. These rare denizens of the open woods love music, and can sometimes be seen playing and dancing among the trees. In complete contrast to the wandering minstrel, now turned actor, the satyr played beautifully. It was a lively tune, a Maytime dance that it played, one that Rosella knew well. Plucking the lute strings with her sure, practiced fingers, my daughter played along with the creature's melody. This seemed to fascinate the satyr. After a few moments, he ceased his own playing and watched Rosella, never taking his eyes off of her instrument. As soon as she finished, she gave the lute to the silent creature, hoping he could play it as skillfully as he did the flute. His eyes lit as the lute was handed over, and with a great smile, he offered Rosella his flute. The creature spoke not a word, but the offer was obvious, and my daughter was too polite to refuse the satyr's gift. As Rosella took the flute, the satyr danced away happily, fingering a new tune, one she had never heard before. The river was the best place to go, Rosella decided. She finally remembered that Genesta had told her the magic fruit lay somewhere on the other side of a waterfall. Following the river to where it came out of the impossible mountains just might bring her to that waterfall. And that's just what she did, traveling back past the small stone bridge and the dwarf's house, farther and farther to the east. At last the river reached the mountains and, Good thinking, Rosella. There tumbled a waterfall, straight down out of the heights, like an exclamation point at the end of a shout. Try as she might, Rosella could not swim under the falls. The current and the force of the water were just too strong. She thought she had seen a faint opening on the other side of the plummeting water, but her efforts to get there were proving, shall we say, fruitless. There just has to be a way through, she kept telling herself loudly as she sat drying herself on the grassy northern edge of the stream. I bet I could do it if I were a fish. Pause. Pause. Or if I were a frog, she exclaimed, enlightenment washing over her. Reaching into her pocket, she took out the frog crown. The idiot said this would turn me into a frog. I wonder how it works. It worked the moment she put the tiny crown onto her head. Ribbit, ribbit! Rosella was a frog. Diving into the water, she was able to go under the waterfall and emerge on the other side. On a small beach outside a dark cave. The moment she left the water, she returned to her own form. It felt good to be herself again, and she was sure she wasn't nearly as attractive while a frog. Gee, that was fun, and I think I might be going in the right direction, she congratulated herself. Looking around, Rosella noticed an old board lying next to the cave's opening. She also discovered that she was still holding the dwarf's spare oil lantern in her hand. The transformation spell had allowed her to bring her possessions along with her. Let us pause for a brief moment. I have written that both my husband and I had tried to teach Rosella all we know. During that moment under the waterfall, our daughter remembered advice that Graham had given her often. Girl, my daddy used to tell me, boy, if I have learned anything in life, I have learned this. When in doubt or in trouble, pick up anything that is not nailed down, and if it is nailed down, look for loose nails or boards. Check carefully into, under, above, below, and behind things. Read everything. You might learn something. Wear clean undergarments, brush after meals, and always remember, nothing is as it appears. Nothing. Rosella took both the advice to heart and the loose board by the cave. Then, using the flint attached to the lantern, she was able to light it. Ever so slowly, she inched her way into the dark opening. Grrr! Rosella was out again before the troll's growl had finished reverberating. She waited a few minutes, getting her breath and courage back under control. She double-checked that the lantern was lit and firmly told herself, "This is for Daddy." Walking quietly and listening intently, she returned to the darkness. The troll didn't get her, of course, otherwise this account would have no further to go. But Rosella swears that she never breathed until she got to the other end of the cave, and she thinks she felt the troll's talons touch her neck once. I suspect she did hold her breath, but if the troll had touched her, she would be dead. Oh, brave, brave Rosella. I too would have died of grief. Her lantern gave just the barest of light, and she made much of her progress by feeling her way. Wary for any sight or sound of the troll, Rosella followed the cave east as far as she could, and then as far south as was possible. From there she moved again to the east, shortly spotting the faintest glimmer of light. At that moment, her lantern revealed just the hint of a great wide crack that slashed through the center of this last part of the cavern. Rosella almost missed noticing the drop, but see it she did, and by the slim light of the dwarf's lamp, she laid the narrow board across the chasm. It just crossed the span to the east, and so did my daughter, still not breathing. Taking the improvised bridge with her, lest the troll follow, clever girl, she followed the dim light, soon crawling out to find herself at the edge of a muddy swamp. With perhaps the exception of the troll, problems did not follow my dear Rosella on her adventure. They waited for her, daring her courage, taunting her mind and body. In this case, the swamp just moldered there patiently, with no breeze at all to ripple its shallow waters, waiting to suck her in. Rosella pondered the problem and saw a solution in a series of tiny dry mounds, high spots that peppered the swamp. Hiking up her long skirt to give her long legs their freedom, a quick jump took her safely to the first tiny island. Again she jumped to a second, and then a third. With one jump after another, she made her way through the muck until she came near an island larger than the rest. A little tree grew upon that small piece of land, a single golden fruit hanging from its limbs. My daughter silently rejoiced. She was looking at the magic fruit that could save her father. She was also looking at one long final leap to the island, one she was sure she couldn't make unaided. She was also looking at a very large poisonous snake, a cobra, that seemed to guard the tree. The board she carried was long enough to get her to the island. The snake posed a sharper problem. It is written that in parts of Daventry, people are known to charm snakes, causing the reptiles to go into brief trances induced by the rhythm of music. Rosella had heard the story as part of her study, so she put her knowledge to the test. First, she laid the board across the final piece of swamp and crossed slowly to its other end. Then, before she actually stepped onto the island, she took the flute out of one of the deep pockets of her dress and nervously played a small hypnotic melody to the cobra. The snake's hard eyes appeared to fuzz over, and its body began swaying. Along with Rosella's tune. Knowing that the charm might not last very long, my daughter rushed past the king cobra and took that single magic fruit from the tree. It was shaped much like a gourd, but she didn't take the time to examine it. As quickly as she had rushed on to the final isle, Rosella hurried back to the board, bridging the water. Carefully she stepped back on, for a single hasty misstep would send her splashing into the sucking slime. She heard the snake resume hissing almost as quickly as her feet stepped onto the makeshift bridge. As soon as she reached the other end, she stooped and picked up the board. The cobra hissed and spat even louder at its loss of the magic fruit. Rosella left the swamp as she had entered, jumping her way across the water. On the shore, she crawled back into the cave. She had forgotten to extinguish the dwarf's lantern, and began her cautious way back through the blackness. Again, she laid the old board across the chasm and carefully crossed. Once safely over, Rosella retraced her steps exactly. She was ready to dart backwards at any sight or sound of the troll, but this time she came through the cave without incident. As she reached light again at the cave's entrance, Rosella saw something that had escaped her notice when she had entered. A large pile of gnawed bones, many of them showing fresh tooth marks. Remembering her father's advice, she took a bone to carry with her. It might come in handy as a weapon, although she hoped things never came to such a desperate state. The light at the end of the tunnel refreshed her soul. The air refreshed her body. She was out, alive, and carrying the fruit that could restore her father's life and health. A slight swell of pride coursed through her body. She reveled in her feat for a few moments, knowing full well that she still had a wicked witch to deal with, and a talisman to return. She also knew that she didn't have much time to do it in. Then Rosella dived into the water and let its force sweep her back out from behind the waterfall. No frogging around for my princess that time. She wanted to meet Lolotte in her own form.